Welcome to Quarantine Creatives. I'm Heath Racela. Got a good one today. Jennifer Euston is on the show. She's a casting director. You might not know her name, but you definitely know her work. Orange is the New Black, Glow, Girls, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Jennifer's got a lot to say. It's an interesting interview. I'll talk more about that in a second. First, I just want to talk about coronavirus, because that's what we do on this show. That's a part of it, right? That's how we ended up in this quarantine, this shutdown, at least in the entertainment industry. I just don't feel like we're talking about it enough anymore. I remember when this show started, it was like mid-May, and we weren't quite to 80,000 deaths. And at the time, I was thinking, 80,000 people, that is insane. That is a huge amount of people. I mean, that's bigger than most football stadiums. And now we're at 125,000 deaths. Plus, 125,000 people have died from COVID-19. And I just feel like we're all getting a little complacent here. Everybody wants to go out. Everyone wants to live their normal life. And I just want to remind everybody that this isn't over. This is still happening. And that normal, it's not the time for it, you know? I was talking to my parents over the weekend, and I think I've said something like this on the show before, but I kind of, in my head, think of this like a hurricane. Imagine a hurricane that's just blowing rain and wind and stuff at your house. You don't get up in the middle of a hurricane and say, boy, I'd like a haircut. Boy, I'd like to go to the Olive Garden. Guess I'll just go outside. I guess it's safe now. Because what would happen? You go outside, you get blown away. You get rained on. Nobody's looking at a hurricane and saying, well, it's time to go out. I can't sit home anymore. But that's what we're doing with this virus. And it's in places where it wasn't before. It's in Florida like crazy. It's in Texas like crazy. All over the Midwest, all over the South. It was really reassuring to me in the beginning of all this when everybody across the country kind of did their duty and stayed home and tried to stop the spread of this. Everyone realized that there was a piece of self-sacrifice for the greater good, that if you stay home, you lessen the possibility of a hospital getting overrun with patients, of an ICU that doesn't have enough beds, doesn't have enough ventilators. That was the rhetoric happening in March and April. I think everybody understood that. Most people obeyed that. Flash forward to end of June, and it's the complete opposite. Everybody wants to go do their stuff, but it's not a normal time. If you're looking at the data, if you're Governor Abbott in Texas or Governor DeSantis in Florida, and you're seeing these numbers go up, you should be shutting down the businesses like we were in March and April. And we should be paying people to stay home. We should be giving them good unemployment benefits, good other benefits. There's no reason for us to be out and about right now with this virus running rampant. And it just feels like we're over that as a society. I'm not personally, but I feel like a lot of people around me are. And the 4th of July is coming up. And I hope everyone just realizes it's not normal this year. Yeah, you probably do want to go to the beach. You probably do want to go to wherever you go. I don't know. Vacation. This isn't the time to do it. It's a different thing. If there were a hurricane on the 4th of July, you wouldn't say, well, fuck it, I'm going to the fireworks. I know it's raining, but what are you going to do? It's the 4th of July. This will be the first year I haven't seen the fireworks. No, if it's raining on the 4th of July, you reschedule them. You do something else. I know it sucks, but that's where we are. So I hope everybody out there is staying safe. I hope you're following all the guidelines. Social distancing, wearing a mask, washing your hands. Nothing has changed since March and April when that was the guidance. It's only gotten worse. And I just hope people aren't getting too complacent. So Jennifer Euston, I was so excited for this conversation. And I say it to her in this piece, but my background, if you've listened to the show, you know, I worked at This Old House for many years. And it's nonfiction, so we didn't work with a casting director. We didn't do traditional casting like a narrative project would. And so I have no idea what that process is like. For me, casting was partially about who the people were, but it was also about the projects they had in their house. It was also about the age and style and location of their house and getting the logistics to work out with other shoots you were scheduling. And when you work in the narrative world, casting is so important, and it's such an art form. And Jennifer does it better than almost anybody out there. And she's got a couple Emmy Awards to prove that, too. Orange is the New Black, Glow, Girls, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Lots of incredible shows that she's worked on. And what I liked about this conversation, too, is it wasn't just about casting. We talk a lot about that, but she's also an old movie buff. We talk a lot about old movies. And just sort of hearing her side of what led her into this business. Because in a lot of ways, it was very familiar to me. I grew up watching a lot of TV and just sort of dreaming about how it all worked and wanting to know how the magic trick was done and wanting to perform that trick for myself. I mean, I knew since I was probably 7 or 8 years old that I wanted to work in television. And the same for Jennifer. She's a movie nerd, a movie buff, and she figured out how to turn it into a career. Jennifer's working on a show now that we talk about at the end with Jenji Kohan, who was the creator and executive producer of Orange is the New Black. They're working on a new show all about the quarantine, so that was exciting too. So here is my interview with casting director Jennifer Euston. So let's start with just talking about sort of how the quarantine's been going for you.
For me personally, or just in the state of the world, or
all of the above? Yeah, take the question however you want, I guess.
All right. Well, let's say with work. Okay, so
Sure.
Let's start with work, because this should be more about work anyway, and not really my own political and sociological beliefs. So in terms of casting, because I'm a casting director, everything shut down.
Yep.
Very, very early, even before the city shut down. In terms of casting, I really don't know when we'll be able to open and do regular old-fashioned casting, having people in the room. Yeah. I don't foresee that happening until there's a vaccine.
Right.
Just because casting offices are small usually and not very well ventilated.
Right.
And people are sitting on top of each other in the waiting room, and then you go into a room to tape and there's multiple people in there. And, especially in New York where I cast, there's usually not like, a huge room where you could have like 6 feet between people and producers and actors.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
And you're just talking the whole time. So there's just a lot of,
everything's
ways
airborne
to transmit it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think production could return before the traditional casting process could? Or are they both kind of intertwined at this point?
We don't know. I mean, LA said you can start reopening stuff, and I'm sure that people are going to try to experiment with different ways, and because that's all we can do right now, because it's such unknown territory. So I think actors should just be careful about what they're signing up for and agreeing to, just for insurance reasons. People have to sign waivers, and with the possibility, that they could get sick, because nobody can guarantee. I mean, if you've ever been on a set, they're packed to the gills with humans, and you're on top of each other. And so it would have to be a real kind of skeleton crew, a couple actors. I don't know how they would portray intimacy and even being close to each other, even within, speaking distance. That looks normal, normal or from the before times. Yeah, I'm very hesitant in terms of when they're gonna be able to shoot things. I think people are I think the nature of a lot of the people in Hollywood is to be optimistic, and we could do this, and hope for the best. But I am a pessimist by nature, and cynical, and I just don't personally see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's the more realistic view too, though, right? You can call it pessimistic, but I feel like it's looking at the data and saying, here's what's happening.
Well, that's what I look at. It's science. Right. I mean, the virus is going to tell us when it's going to be safe to do anything. And honestly, until there's a vaccine, I don't know how you could feel safe going to a set, in any capacity as a PA or a boom operator or an actor, But there's been, I've heard there's been articles written about it and all different sorts of proposals, just like if you do an indie movie and quarantine the people and shoot it in 3 weeks, and put them all in the same hotel and take everybody's temperature and get everybody tested. I mean, there's protocols, I guess, you could put in place, but it just seems unrealistic to me, and I don't know what studio is going to open up their gates to start functioning again, or sound stages. because it's not just, it's not just crew people that work on lots, you have security guards, you have, maintenance staff, there's so many different jobs,
right. Yeah, just
So
the logistical challenges of all that, right? It's
yeah,
so many
yeah,
people just all on top
yeah.
of each other.
And that aren't even on like shooting, or aren't even so I don't have a lot of hope that it's gonna open up very fast, not before the end of the year, certainly, but that's just me, that's my opinion, so like to shoot anything, and especially not television, because again, you can't, you can't quarantine people or isolate people for months from their family to
right.
shoot,
To
13
do,
episodes
10,
of something.
13, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 22 if you're a network show.
Right.
So this is just all my opinion, but I do it's just science for me. It's just looking at numbers and science, and especially since the numbers have been going up in LA exponentially of cases right now.
Right.
But it's been, not good. Really not good, even as things are reopening.
Right.
So if you can't even reopen restaurants or salons or gyms or whatever they're opening, I don't know how you open a set or studio or what have you. We will see. But in terms of casting, we can't open up a traditional casting office, of course, but with the dawn of technology, we're able to do a lot via the internet and Zoom and FaceTime and all sorts of things. I can cast something so that when they're ready to shoot, they have the cast, but we can do it all virtually.
Right. I've talked to some actors on the show that, one of the guys I talked to had sort of seen this trend even prior to sort of the quarantine and stuff. That it seemed like there were more casting was moving online, or at least, sending in reels and things like that. Prior to all this, were you still doing kind of in-person casting sessions?
Oh, yeah.
Or had you so virtual is completely new for you?
Oh, no, it's not completely new. It's always been used in some capacity. Going back, I started in 1997. So, people would still self-tape in 97. It would just be VHS tapes, So self-taping isn't a new concept.
Yep.
In any way, the way people can do it now, and that instead of FedExing a VHS from New York to LA as a self-tape or, whatever, we can just send it a link,
right.
And people just do it so fast in their home that you can just iPhone record a audition at this point, No, I still in my work, we still have traditional casting sessions.
Right.
There's something about, being in the room and the energy in the room. It goes both ways, because Orange is the New Black, every role was cast off tape. Jenji was in LA and I was in New York.
Yep.
So you can still cast a show if it's just being cast off tape. I'm still seeing the people in person.
Yep.
There's still a human factor in it, and they're coming into my office, but their tapes are being watched, and
right.
That's how they're being cast. In terms of it being a trend, and maybe other offices were using it more. I only used it if somebody was out of town or if they couldn't make their appointment physically, but I still wanted to make sure they get considered.
Sure.
They were considered. I'd be like, just tape yourself at home and send it in, just to make sure that they didn't miss the boat.
Yeah. But I'm sure it is a difference, having them in the room, or even now, like with Zoom or something, if an actor self-tapes and they miss something in the interpretation of the character, or, you see it and you say, oh, I wish they tried it this way.
I'll just have them retape.
Okay.
So I've done that in the past too.
Gotcha.
So they'll send the tape to me when I see that they didn't do it right, or they misinterpreted it, or I can give them a direction that'll make the tape better.
Yeah.
I just make them retape. So that's
right.
what I do. That's still my job before I show it to producers, because I want to present the best
of course.
of any actor
right.
at any point. So I don't at least in my office, if you send me a self-tape and it's not bad, I'm not just going to be, and if it's bad, I'm not just going to be like, oh, well, too bad. That's
right.
it for you. I'll call them.
Right.
I'll call them and let them know, what we're, what they're looking for, maybe what they could do differently, play right, just stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'll just get on the phone with them personally, and just let them know.
Well, so yeah. I'm excited to talk to you just because this is a whole different world for me. Like my background, I'm a producer and director, but on the lifestyle side, I worked at This Old House primarily for the last 15 years. And,
cool.
yeah, so it's all, reality, lifestyle. We're casting as producers, we're doing the casting, but some of the other considerations are how the house is and what the project
right,
is,
right.
So it's kind of this holistic process. I haven't worked on the narrative side at all, so kind of the whole casting process is new for me. I want to back up for a minute and just sort of talk about how you got into it and just sort of what led you to thinking it was a viable career.
I have always known since I was I mean, we're talking, 7, 8 years old, that I was going to work on movies. Like,
Yeah.
I just knew I was just a strange, weird child that just kind of was sucked into films and television. It was just like, oh, I want to do that.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to act. I had, I had paralyzing stage fright, and I would never, think I could get up in front of people and do anything, but I wanted to make it,
Right.
and, but I didn't, but back then, I mean, this is in the 80s and stuff, the only thing back then was the jobs you knew were like writers and directors and actors. Like, there
Sure.
was no, really knowledge. And when I knew that I could go to college for film, I I sort of was just kind of just really driven and just sort of had my like blinders on, and I just had like one goal was like I was going to do this, and I live in New Jersey. I went to NYU, and but I didn't want to take the film program there.
Yeah.
I wanted, because I was, I'm sort of an academic, and I love science. I double majored in cinema studies and anthropology. So
Oh, cool.
I wanted to study film history, and I love science. So I wanted my education not to be just like, four kids going out in the street with a camera and like shooting something.
Right.
I knew that I could get the practical experience doing internships. So that's what I did. I had no life. I had no college life, because I was like doing 18 credits a semester, work study job, a regular job,
You were
internship
driven.
every semester. I just knew that I had to do this,
Yeah.
and but I didn't know what part I was going to fall into. I was investigating script supervisors, editing, all the different things to see where I fit in. I was interning and on a movie, and I fell into casting. And I had figured out. I just came home one day. I was there during a summer internship, and I told my mom, I was like, I think I'm supposed to do casting. And she was like, oh God, help us. And because my whole family, we have like a freakish, weird memory. We all love film and television.
Uh-huh.
That's what we bonded over growing up. We didn't go on a lot of vacations or have a lot of money. So our family time was, sharing film and TV and stuff like that. And,
That's awesome.
so that was something that was really important to all of us. And my whole family, my mom, my dad, and my sister, we all had this freakish memory for actors and films. Like, we could just recall things. And I just made it into something I could do for a job, because back then there was no internet, there was no IMDb.
Yeah.
And if I could make a list of actors, and not even that like famous actors or because we would sort of clock character actors that we loved. Our favorite actors weren't necessarily the movie stars. So, and I'd been watching old films and studying films from the 30s and 40s, since
Oh,
I was in
wow.
high
Yeah.
school. So we all kind of had this talent for it, and I was just able to make it into a career, because even as an assistant, if I could recall something really fast, like if you're having a discussion with another casting director or producer, and they're like, what was that guy who was in that thing? And I could just say the name in the movie, it was of value,
Sure.
because you couldn't just look it up. And, when I was a kid and like in high school and stuff, it was sort of like a party trick, it was just like, Jen, name every movie, Anthony Hopkins in, or Jen, who's the whole cast of this movie, and
Yeah. Right.
I worked in a video store, high school and college, like a mom and pop video store in my town. And I was surrounded by it. So knowing that was a commodity, I actually did an internship in 96 in LA, because I wanted to see what LA was like, because
Yeah.
that was like my dream, was to go there. So I found a way to go there with school. And I did an internship at Universal Television, and a great casting director, Megan Brandman, just sort of taught me how to do everything, because you can't go to school for casting. It has to be like you have to learn it from another casting director,
Right.
And she taught me everything, and I came back, and when I graduated, the only TV show in 97 that was shooting in the city was Law and Order, and it happened to be a Universal TV show. So Megan called over to the Universal casting directors and said, if you need an assistant, you could just hire Jen. She doesn't have to intern. Because that was my whole goal too, upon graduating college, because I had student loans, and I couldn't just graduate and then intern,
Right.
and that's why I did them all while I was in college, because I needed to start making a living, albeit a very small living when you start in casting. And throughout casting, it's not, you don't go into casting for the money. But I needed a job, I wasn't going to just graduate and intern. And so I did that for a year, and I just coincidentally, we were on the same floor as Martin Scorsese's production office at the time, Kappa Productions, and Ellen Lewis was the casting director, and she was finishing up Bringing Out the Dead, and she was working out of Marty's office. And my friend Marcia, who also worked with me, we knew her just by talking to her in the hallways and stuff like that. And Ellen had to go cast another movie, not a Martin Scorsese movie, but another movie. And Marcia went with her, and then they called me and said, "Do you want to come and work with us?" So I said yes, because movies was always my first love.
Right.
So I was with Ellen for almost like 7.5 years, I think, because it's an apprenticeship at that point. Then, if you're lucky that somebody likes you and wants to keep you and wants to teach you, that's what you do.
Yeah, you're learning a craft. I mean, it's craftsmanship.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. It's a skill, and again, it's not taught, and really it can't be taught. You have to learn it through experience. You have to learn it through osmosis. You have to just do it. My reactions are gut reactions. I can't explain to you why I think somebody is going to be right for the part. I just feel it. It's in my gut. Like I literally feel it in my in my gut when I'm like, okay, I got it. All right. Good.
And what are you looking for at that point? Like, is it partially just sort of the character on the page, but I'm sure another piece of it must just be working with the director, or in the case of TV, the showrunner, like figuring out sort of how that whole crew is going to gel together too, right?
That's part of it. Yeah. I mean, I've inherited many from different wonderful people I've worked with, like a no assholes policy. So that's a factor in it for me. I don't want to introduce a person into a set, especially on a TV show where you're there forever. Somebody who may have we know misbehaves or has a bad reputation, or a bad work ethic, or any of the things. So, or is just a dick. You know what I mean? To be quite frankly, to just be honest.
You spend a lot of time with these people, so yeah.
Yeah, and I'm lucky to have over the years, because it's like it's pushing 26 years I've been doing this. You learn about everybody, especially in New York, which is a small community. You figure stuff like that out. So I mean, it's a combination. I want actors that I love and I've been fans of for years. I'm a fan of actors before I'm anything else.
Yep.
Like that's just always, I'm a fangirl of shows and movies, and so I'm always on the actor side, and I'm always rooting for them. So in terms of the process, yeah, I mean, you pray that you get to work with people that have the same taste as you. That is the ultimate goal in casting, is that you form relationships with directors or producers throughout your career, where you work together a lot and you have a shorthand, and it just kind of gels like any other creative relationship, that they would have with their DP or with their editor or anything like that.
Yeah. And as you say, you're so early in the process that, that relationship, I'm sure, is critical, just because you're kind of helping launch the whole thing, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're creating you're giving them the biggest instruments they're going to be using in their piece, in their what they're using, the human beings that are going to bring it to life. So you just pray that you are lucky enough to work with people that trust you. And it's also about trust, like they have to trust me to know what I'm doing, and that I've scoured the land. I've seen everybody. I know, trust my taste, trust my instincts, and I trust them, to be good souls, to be creative, to be interesting, to be open-minded, and let me, say, I know you kind of wrote it like this, but what if we put somebody like this in it,
Yeah.
What would you say to that? And I've been really fortunate with the people I've been able to work with, where they've said, hey, that might be cool, and
right.
and it may change things, but and hope maybe for the better, so that's the dream scenario in any I think in any creative situation, but to be in a situation where you're not scared to say, to say, maybe bring up somebody who's so random and so out of the box. There would be other producers or directors who would hold it against you.
Right.
It's about working with the people that would want you to think like that, and expect you to think like that.
Yeah. And it can change the whole project. It can send it in a completely different direction that surprises everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious too, just thinking about sort of some of the shows that you've been on, Orange is the New Black, Girls, Glow, where it's these ensemble casts. Like, how important is getting that ensemble right from the beginning, and how much work does that like? You can't just think of each actor as an individual, I'm sure, right? You're thinking about how they're going to play off of each other too.
No, I mean, not necessarily. No,
Okay.
I actually, what I do is, I mean, I know that sounds weird, but I mean, I believe that if you get the best person for each role,
Yeah.
then it is just gonna gel because we don't know, and we don't do a lot of chemistry reads on a lot of those projects. We've done a couple, like with the leads and stuff. You'll do some chemistry reads, but there's no huge ensemble chemistry reads. It's really, it's just a shot in the dark, kind of.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, and for me on Orange, I knew all those ladies,
Yeah.
and I've known them for years. And I know they're all good people and I love them, and thankfully they all got along. Glow even more so. I mean, that was so curated and so special. And I've known so many of those ladies and they were super close. They're like a really tight cast. And that's the dream that happens, but I think it's by filling those ensembles with people that they're not kind of consumed with themselves. They care about other people.
Yeah.
They support other actors and actresses, and promote other, their friends. And those are the kind of people like I like to give opportunities to, people that don't just are desperate to just take all the limelight,
Sure.
We want people that are going to want to work with each other,
Right.
and especially in Glow, it was such a trust thing because these girls are throwing each other around in the first couple of days we're shooting. I mean, they're
Right.
really, so with Glow, it was very special because I mean, I knew all of those girls before this, and I was friendly with them and I knew what kind of people they were. And it's like, oh, I could trust, I know that, Kate Nash is going to be awesome. And Betty Gill, is so sweet. Like I know all these people. So you just like attracts like in a lot of ways. So I kind of feel like that's maybe my strategy.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not a conscious one if there is.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's hard to describe. I do think you just pray. You just
Right.
pray that everybody gets along,
Well, when you're getting to know people, though, like, are you bringing them in first as guest stars or day players on other roles, and then
Oh
sort of
yeah, yeah. I
that's
mean,
sort of okay?
these are people I've been seeing since I was an intern,
Gotcha.
and since I was a casting assistant when I was 20 or 21. Either we were the same age or they were older than me. And when you're, and I worked consistently, I never was out of work.
Right.
So we would have sessions every single day and we would bring in a lot of the same people, especially in New York where the community was so small. And if you're working on a couple of projects, or I did pilot season, about 5 pilot seasons for Fox Studios with Marcia DeBonis, who's a casting director. And pilot season is it's like learning every actor in 3 months. It's like sort of like cramming in every actor in New York in 3
Yeah.
months.
Right.
And then you bring some of them in every single day for different pilots. And so you really get to know people because because when you're an assistant, you're sitting outside, you're sitting you're in the waiting room
Right.
basically. And you just you see how they behave in the waiting room. You see how they treat other people and you see how they treat you, and it's that thing where, actors that come in and don't even acknowledge an assistant, if, any actor wants a tip,
Right.
those assistants are going to be your casting director someday.
Yeah.
So you should be kind and not like ass kissing kind, but acknowledge that they're people too. They're people and that they may be deciding if you get a job in 20 years or not.
Right. And I feel like that it's that way across the board in this industry. Like the
Oh
PAs
yeah.
become the producers and, the ACs become the
Yeah,
DPs and
yeah, and you always knew who the good directors were because they would come in and they talk to you like a human being,
right.
or the good agents or the good managers. It's across the board. I mean, I had agents that were horrible to me because I wasn't anybody.
Right.
I was just an assistant, and then I had agents and managers who treated me, like a peer or just like a human being. Sometimes you just want to be treated, kindly, and like how you treat them. And those are people you don't forget that when you're in the position that I was, and so there's a little mom and pop agencies that have been sweet to me since I was 20 years old. I will see any of their actors, any of them. They don't even have, it's like, they'll be like, would you see? Yeah, set them up. Not a problem, So I think that's really important too, you know?
Yeah, I've heard that a lot on this show of just sort of, no matter what the role is in the industry, sort of that importance of being kind to everybody and just, not knowing sort of who you're going to need to count on later. And as you say, not doing it, in an ass-kissy way or just to, like
No,
just
it's just
being
like
genuinely kind to people.
yeah, it's just like it's like who raised these people? It's just like when you go out with somebody and if they treat like the waiter or the wait staff or the, service terribly, then you're like, it tells a lot about a person, and I think that's applicable to any kind of facet in this industry too.
Yeah.
Nobody's above it. Nobody has, like, who's so great that they have the right to treat somebody poorly.
Right.
We're not doing brain surgery here. This isn't like NASA or neuroscience.
Right. It's not
It's
life
like,
or death. Yeah. It's
no,
TV.
and
It's
yeah,
film. Yeah.
exactly. And I think knowing that at a young age was really good for me too. But in terms of me knowing people and knowing ensembles, I know thousands of actors just through just time,
Yeah.
and them repeatedly coming in for years. You get to know people, then you get to know, who they partner with or who they marry, and then you get to know their kids, and then their kids grow up and are actors. And that's the point I'm at now. Like, actresses that would come in when I was in my 20s or who had babies back then, their babies are actors, and I'm
Wow.
casting them.
That's so cool.
And it's like, yeah, it's really kind of wonderful to know that and to share that.
Yeah.
And again, this is very New York specific. We have a smaller community.
Sure.
I mean, I have it in LA. I've worked in LA. I've lived in LA. But for me, this is very New York specific, So not that this doesn't happen in LA either, but I don't know. There's a different vibe in New York when it comes to that,
Yeah. Well, I'm curious too, like sort of as people are coming up, like how often are you going out to see either Broadway shows or, small theater things? Or okay,
all
so
the time.
the theater community as well too. Okay.
Oh yeah, I love theater. I mean, the theater community is where I cast Orange. Like that's where I drew from, really, because when I was casting Orange, I mean, there was no Netflix. Like I was still getting DVDs in the mail,
Right.
and I didn't know what this was.
It was one of the first shows, right? Orange is the New Black.
They had only announced House of Cards.
Yep.
And that had famous people attached to it,
right.
and a famous director. And then this came up, and I had never met Jenji. We Skyped Jenji and Tara Herman and Mark Burley, her producers, because they had watched Girls, and they that's how I got the job. I didn't meet them in person first, and I liked the script. I hadn't read the book. I did, but I thought I was making a web series. I didn't know what this was,
right.
And because we didn't know what this was, it was also hard to explain to actors and agents what it was. So I got a lot of passes, like lots of passes on the pilot and in the first season, because we couldn't show them what it was, but it gave me the opportunity to bring in, and because it was such a just a variety, a menagerie of all different kinds of actors and actresses of all shapes and sizes and ethnicities, and everything you can imagine was even really in the pilot and the first season. Those are the actors that work in theater,
right.
Because all the TV they could get, especially at the time, were, if they were lucky, a day player role to play like nurse number 1,
right.
Or
2
like
or 3 lines, and
teacher number 3 or
right.
something, And so I had the script where these characters had names and they were going to have storylines, and I could cast, Black women and Asian women and trans women, and I'm just anything you could think of, and give them real substantial stories. And thankfully I go to tons of theater. I love theater. I love theater casting directors. I think they do an amazing job, getting talent out there. And I was able to just, take from those reserves for 20 years, and put them on Orange, which was great.
Sure.
And
I want to talk about that for a minute too. Just sort of, I feel like we're in this moment now, especially sort of with this resurgence of Black Lives Matter after, George Floyd's killing and all this, of a lot of people in the industry sort of having to look at their own hiring patterns and say, can I do better? Can I be more diverse? And I feel like you've been on that for the last 5 or 10 years. Like, this isn't new for you to say, we need more.
It isn't, but we can always do better. Anybody can always do better. I can do better. I don't think that I always even said at the beginning, that it kind of was starting, but it was going to be slow, because it's going to evolve. It has to evolve somehow. And yeah, I mean, I still can do better. I'm so glad I had opportunities, and I had producers that were very open to me. And when I, would send them people, of all different races or, everything, it wasn't, they would be like, oh, cool. Yeah, let's do this. Let's, and so I was met with, thankfully for most of the time, they were open to it, but not everybody has that luxury,
Sure.
and there are people and there are producers and directors that'll be like, no, this is a white role, or this is I need this, or I'm going to cast a stereotypical role and it has to be a Black person, and I mean, that still happens. And everybody has to do better.
Right.
It's not just us. I mean, casting doesn't have the final say on things, so I think people don't understand that too, that even though we've been trying, because I'm not the only one who's been trying either. I've just had really responsive, progressive, directors and producers to work with.
Right.
But more casting directors than will say, can we go Black on this role? Can we go Latinx on this role? Can we go, and changing, gender too, I mean, and we've always been doing that. It's just at the end of the day, the producers and the directors and the studios and the networks will make that decision.
Right. Do you feel like the shift to streaming has changed any of it? Like, I feel like there have been, especially on Netflix, just voices of color represented in ways, and not just Black, but kind of across the spectrum.
Well, I think that was because Netflix. That's part of Netflix thing. But I also feel that it was because for the demand for content, And so I think the intersection of that and just what's been going on with what was starting to go on socially, and streaming and social media and the rise of the internet, it all kind of was like the perfect storm, you know, to get more voices heard, but it's still not enough.
Right.
You have to start seeing it on the channels that maybe people can't subscribe to, people who just have a TV and have channel, have just the main foreign networks, it has to be there and it has to be more. And I don't know when that shift is going to happen.
Right.
You can't just play one show that has like This Is Us and say, oh, look what we did.
Right.
And pat yourselves on your back. And that's the end of it, you know?
Yeah, it's got to be a bigger structural change. And not
just... And in film too.
Definitely. And not just kind of racial diversity, but we touched on a little bit, but sort of LGBTQ casting.
I mean, I don't even know if we can use diversity anymore in terms of ethnicity, but my idea of diversity was never just racial. It was also, gender too, but also, people with different body shapes or who look different, or disabled actors,
right,
or, not your conventionally beautiful actors, or, people that were interesting, people that had something different about them. To me, that is all encompassing, I mean, that to me was always what I always said. Like, I just love casting all shapes and sizes and colors, and I just like making it, and whatever made somebody different or an individual was what was gonna stand out and tell a story, you know? It's about representation so that people at home can see themselves in stories and characters, you know? And it's really important. So,
yeah. Well, and what I wanted to ask too was just sort of casting Laverne Cox in Orange Is the New Black. Like that, I feel like casting her did so much for trans representation and just sort of normalization, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word, but just sort of getting people to understand what a transgendered person is, and get comfortable with that idea.
Yes.
Having her in a mainstream show like this, it opened people's eyes, I think, in a way that it would be hard to if it was just an abstract concept, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, Laverne's hard not to love.
Yep.
She's extremely intelligent. She's beautiful. She's strong. And I knew Laverne before the show.
Yeah.
I was casting a movie where the director wasn't sure if we were going to cast a transgender woman, or if he just wanted the character to be a guy who, a man who was thinking about transitioning but hadn't really done anything yet, And so, and this was in 2012, so I had already done a lot of research, and and there weren't a ton of actors. And also for Orange, I needed someone who was Black, if that was very specific to the story. So, it wasn't like you put out a breakdown, or you could go online and Google just all the Black transgender actors out there, it wasn't, they weren't represented by agents. They weren't, it wasn't a time where now, there's just so much more, thankfully, it's just so much more visibility,
Right.
But I read the script and I read the role of Sophia and I'm like, oh, that's Laverne. Like that was honestly, that was like the easiest role for me to cast because I was like, she's the best, that I've read. And I
Yeah.
go, and she'll be fantastic in this, And so for me, it was just, I just brought her in, put her on tape, and that was that, So it wasn't like the hardest person to cast in Orange was Taylor, was the pretty white girl, but Laverne was sort of a revelation, in so many ways. And like I said, with anybody I ever cast, I just open a door. They have to do all the work, They're the ones that have to go out on that set. They're the ones that have to endure all the conditions, all the positive or negative, responses. I just open a door. That's all I can. That's all I can do. And I was happy and proud to do it for Laverne because I knew she was going to go kick some ass, and she did. And she's a great woman.
I want to ask you too, just sort of, you talked about watching movies a lot as a kid and, just sort of growing up in that cinema space. Like when you're watching a movie, like my mind goes to sort of how did they get that shot? Like how did they light it? What kind of camera rig are they using? Do you watch a movie with casting in mind? And like, how do you appreciate good casting when you see it?
If something's cast really well, you don't see it. Just like when something is shot really well or edited really well, it's invisible. It looks effortless, if that makes sense.
It does. I think to the audience it should be invisible, but like
that there's no bumps, there's no bumps, there's no kinks, there's no part while you're watching the story where somebody pops up that doesn't seem to fit and takes you out of the story.
Right.
That's good casting,
But like, do you see it from like a technical side at all? Do you look at it like, is it you don't get lost in your craft when you're sitting in a theater?
No, I don't. Okay. No, because I still love, because film and television is still an escape for me. I mean, I will now make note. I mean, but I was making note of good actors when I was younger too. So that really hasn't changed my process. I just watch something and I go, oh damn, that person was so good. But I was doing that when I was 10, when my dad was showing me old movies and stuff, and I'd be like, oh, like you just kind of. I would kind of hook on to people, and then I would then as a kid when I was not, being paid or had any need to know who these people were, but I still wanted to know more. I'd watch an old movie and I'd see my first Dana Andrews movie and I'd be like, I love Dana Andrews. And then I would go to the library and buy his autobiography or the biography and want to know everything about the person and watch all of his movies until I had him studied. And I did that with every actor, if they were leading actors or if they were character actors. And I think my aesthetic in terms of faces, because I love faces, I think are just so important and on screen, and I want interesting faces and real faces and character actors, and that aesthetic came from watching films from the 30s and 40s, you know. So yeah, I still have the luxury, I think, thankfully, that I can watch a TV show or a movie and just get lost in it the way I used to when I was younger.
Yeah.
Still being aware, but like I said, I was still picking out actors when I was younger. So nothing has really changed, except now I can say, who was that? Write their name down, look them up, call their agent, and then meet with them or have them audition for something.
Right.
So it's a much more productive way, I guess, of watching a show or a movie. So,
well, let me ask then, I'm thinking just sort of about those films of the 30s and 40s and sort of what made them different. And my mind goes to sort of, a lot of them are in black and white. They're often very simple sets or, shot against a canvas or something. It's kind of that pre-CinemaScope VistaVision, where everything had to get big and grand. And so I guess there probably was a lot more focus put onto the faces of the actors because that's going to be doing the hard work for you, right?
Right. It wasn't special effects. It wasn't like CGI. It was the acting and it was the characters. And back then, for me, I loved movies. I loved screwball comedies as a genre. And then I loved pre-code films, probably. Those were like my specialties in school when I was studying, were pre-code and screwball comedies. I watched everything though. I mean, dramas I watched them all. And it was fun watching, screwball comedians do drama roles and vice versa. And I mean, I do think I was born in the wrong time. So that has something to do with it too.
Yeah.
I related to stories and I related to like those kind of emotions and different things that were happening in that kind of comedy. My dad kind of raised me in very old-fashioned comedy.
Yep.
I was sort of, placed in front of the television and said, okay, now we're going to watch Laurel and Hardy, and
Yeah.
now we're going to watch all the Mel Brooks films, and now we're going to watch, all these my mom loved Westerns, and I was kind of sat down by my parents and they had two very different tastes. They had very different tastes. So I got both. I got kind of the best of both,
It's like
And
film school from an early age. That's
it
really
was
cool.
because,
Yeah.
because they had great taste in film, and thankfully and my dad had great taste in music, and so did my mom, and I just sort of absorbed it all, and so I always felt kind of an anomaly in that way, just because I'm out of time, I
Right.
sort of my parents were had me when they were 25. They were young parents, so they just wanted me to enjoy what they enjoyed,
Yeah.
especially my dad, and he wanted to show me like what fun he was, like just watch. You have to watch these classic people, because that's where all these people now are, that's what comes before them. You have to know what's in the past, sort of appreciate artists now, I think. So there was it was being taught, but I was enjoying it,
Right.
and I liked it. And then when I was about 13 or 14, I started to really go off on my own, because AMC had just started. That was a new cable channel.
Sure. Yeah.
American Movie Classics, and they are like what TCM is now. That's
Right.
what they used to be like. There were no commercials. There was intros and outros with old movies. They didn't produce, now they're producing show. It's like a whole different thing,
Right.
And they didn't colorize movies back then. They were like they were pure. And I would just, find these gems on AMC, but I would also go to the library, my public library, once a week, because they had a huge VHS collection of old films, and you could take 5 out a week. And I was a very disciplined kid, and I would watch 5 old movies a week as like homework,
Wow.
So that by the time I got to NYU, that's why I was able to do like interns and my work study job and my regular job, because I knew all the movies. I'd already seen all the movies that were mandatory viewing for everybody else. I'd already seen all of them. So it was like sort of a bit of a shortcut. So they've influenced me incredibly. And I think that, again, it was just pure luck and coincidence. I got to work with Martin Scorsese's casting director, because, he's the biggest cinephile on the planet, and film historian. That's it. So getting to work on his movies was educational too, because I knew exactly, what he was looking for if he referred to old movie stars and stuff like that, or movies and stuff. Because it was just, and he was my favorite, and he is my favorite director. He was my favorite director. That's why I went to NYU. It was because Martin Scorsese went to NYU.
Wow.
I used to drag my parents, because he was doing film restoration, back in the all the time. So like in the late 80s and early 90s, I would make my parents drive me down to like Rutgers in New Brunswick, because he'd be showing a restoration of a Michael Powell film or something, and it would be him and Thelma speaking and stuff. And I did that to my parents. And I was just like, you're coming down, we're watching this.
Right.
And I was 14 or 15 years old, and then to eventually in 10 years, meet him and know Thelma, and it's just like, it was crazy. It was just like an amazing sort of circle. And so I kind of knew what I was doing. I was like, okay, I think I made the right choice. I mean, I questioned it. You question it every day, but you still, when you talk about it like this, you're like, oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
This is why I love it. Yeah. I wonder too, just about like kids growing up, nowadays, like with streaming and all, everything is so deliberate. Like you have to click on the movie you want to watch or the show you want to watch, and, kind of seek it out. Whereas like when we were growing up, like you said, Turner Classic Movies or AMC or, even like TBS and TNT, or
not even that. Like if you're in New York, New Jersey, just watching like WPAX, Channel 11.
Yeah. And just, it was all these cheap shows that like they could just play them, and, Three Stooges and and Little Rascals. Yeah. You just sort of, just when you're bored as a kid.
It was sort of like roulette, it was just like whatever's on, okay, I want to watch, and you would just kind of randomly find things that you loved. For sure.
And it sounds like you were a lot more deliberate about that than a lot of us. But even just for me growing up, having that reference point.
I was like an indoor girl. I wasn't a kid that liked to go play outside. I have asthma. I was like, I like to stay inside, and I, would just sit on the floor in front of the TV like I was going to jump into it. My mom said, she used to say, you look like you were to just jump in, and just and just escape into all these stories, any story, and Oh, I did that too. I think there's a beauty in the randomness that people don't have anymore.
Yeah. It'll be
Yeah.
interesting sort of to see, where these
What
kids end up and what their reference points are because yeah, it is so kind of scattered now. I do want to ask you just about one last thing, and that's you've worked with Jenji a lot. You're doing a new show with her, sort of
Yeah.
in this quarantine time, right?
Yes, yes. We've been working on a new show called Social Distance,
Yep.
which is an anthology series, and we are casting it and filming it remotely.
Wow.
Obviously, casting it remotely, filming it remotely, in that there will be no crew members when the actors are filming. They're filming themselves with equipment that we're sending them.
Yep. Is it a drama? Is it a comedy? Like what's?
It's both. It's both.
Yep.
I mean, it's an anthology, so every episode is different.
Gotcha. Okay.
And everything's about, I mean, the thing is, we started this before George Floyd was murdered, and so this was mainly to deal with the COVID,
Yep.
The pandemic, and how people, because also it's about, I also I'm like very COVID literate, and so like everybody's calling it quarantine.
Yeah.
We're self-isolating. We were self-isolating. It's
Yeah.
not quarantine unless you're diagnosed,
yeah.
and then you have to quarantine yourself.
Right.
But yeah, so it's just trying to sort of reflect what we were doing when we started, and we're still doing now, is try to reflect the reality of since March, since all this stuff happened, and the different storylines that can happen with people, different situations people are going to find themselves in while they're self-isolating or quarantining or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So and to make sure that being able to produce it virtually is safe, like nobody. So my job is to cast actors that, or I know that are together, that either in any kind of partnership, familial situation, roommate situation, people that have been staying together, so nobody's exposed to anybody.
Gotcha.
There's no new actors being introduced into the space or anything.
So there will be scenes with people playing off each other in the same space, but it's just people that are living together at this point.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that are related to each other, but they may not be playing like they're related to each other. You know what I mean? Like they might be playing different parts of the story. But so it's really been interesting, and it's a challenge for the actors, but they're all stepping up, and it's fun, and make and again, it's safe, and it's just it's an experiment, really, and bless Jenji and our showrunner Hillary Graham, who thought of trying to do like what could we do during a pandemic? What could we do during a pandemic? Still be creative, but produce it from our own homes, cast it from, my house, and get the actors involved, and, get them all the equipment they need, and then be directed virtually.
Right.
Like we have our directors and our DPs and stuff while they're shooting, talking to them and directing them. It's scripted. The actors have lines. It's not their real life.
Yeah. It's
been great. It's been fun. It's challenging and it's fun, and each story is different, and it's just kind of great, Yeah.
So, it's a Netflix show?
Yes.
So will it be like a traditional Netflix where like they all have to get, edited and then they all drop on one date, or
yes.
is it okay?
Yes. Yeah. I think I don't know the exact plan, but yeah, we're it's just like any TV show. We're editing as we're shooting, and then when they decide when it's going to come out, probably before the year ends, certainly.
Yeah.
And it's going to be 8 episodes, and I've gotten some, great people that I can't tell you about. And for fear of Ted Sarandos or Netflix, like walking in my house.
I'll just have to tune in then. That's
well, yeah, or you'll see announcements or whatever. It's just, again, I've just been lucky to know, because I grew up with so many of these actors. Like I said, I know kind of who's together and who lives together, who's roommates, who have kids, and all different, combinations, not just like husband and wife, husband, wife, but like, roommates, mother, parent, child actors, kind of everything that you can think of. So
that's cool. Yeah, it's wild. Just sort of as we were talking about at the beginning of this, like when all of this quarantine stuff first started, or the pandemic first happened in March. Like in my head, I was like, okay, it's maybe a month and a half, 2 months. And, even this show started a month and a half ago. And sort of at that time in like mid-May, it was like, how long can this go for? Like, are people going to be sick of talking about the pandemic, a month from now? And you just sort of realize, like, we're barely at the beginning of this right now. Like, this
Oh,
is,
I knew that back then.
yeah,
Like I said, I'm a science geek, and I read like science magazines and stuff, and science and websites and stuff. And so I had heard about what was going on in Wuhan in January, and I was kind of fascinated by it because any kind of infectious stuff always. I've had health problems and stuff, and,
yeah,
I have an immune disorder, so I'm always kind of just keeping up with as many things as I can. And I remember reading about it, and then when I heard how they suspected it had gone from, animal to human, and then they started to say, like, either a bat and some other animal, picked up with something bad. Then it reminded me of Contagion,
right,
which I had seen, when it came out and scared the hell out of me. And I was watching Contagion in January. Because I was like, oh, that's like what happened in Contagion. I'm just
right.
gonna watch it, and it was really instructional. Like, it's crazy if you go back and watch it, which I guess people had done since. But when I watched it, I was like, my mom is a nurse, so I remember calling. She was like, because I was talking about this coronavirus, COVID, whatever you want. I think I was calling it coronavirus then, but I was obsessed with it, and I kept bothering my mother and many friends, unfortunately, like telling them about it. And they're like, will you stop? Like, we don't want, your OCD is like out of control. My mom's like, stop talking about it.
Right.
So when I watched Contagion, it was really amazing because you realize how accurate Steven Soderbergh and his, the epidemiologist he wrote it with was, because you're watching, you're going, oh yeah, Gwyneth is putting her hands in the bar peanuts, and then she's handing her credit card to somebody. Like,
Yeah.
it really tracks everything, and like the elevator, but like all this stuff. So even early on, I was like telling my friends, I was like, be really careful about elevators. Like, I was just like taking it, like the Contagion is like sort of like a like, I learned what the R naught was from Kate Winslet. I mean, it's really an informational film if you watch it, if you want to, hear, see, like,
Right.
really see how something can get this out of control. I never expected it to do this.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be bad in Asia, but not even thinking about how small our world has become in terms of travel and getting around, and how easily things like this can be,
Right.
spread.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so I knew it was going to be bad when kind of like mid-February things started getting out of control over in Asia. I was like, oh boy, this is going to be not good. But I don't think anybody, well, if we had our pandemic team still in
Right.
place that
That would've
Trump
helped.
fired, that would have helped a lot in giving us a little bit of a heads up. But obviously we weren't. And I think most people know my politics, so I won't get into it. But that would have been a big help,
Right.
to prepare us, because we were completely, blindsided by this,
Yeah.
by
And just
information.
and to think it's late June now, and the curve hasn't really flattened here in the US. It's still,
This is nothing. And you have to also understand, any kind of new virus, I'm not going to get too scientific, but we don't know enough about it, and we haven't had enough time with it
right.
to tell you. We can't even tell you that people who've had it, who have antibodies, how long those antibodies will protect them,
Right.
because we haven't they're like, we don't know if they last past 2 months, because we haven't been past 2 months.
Right.
There's no way to, we don't have a vaccine. When we do get a vaccine, we don't know how long those antibodies are going to last. Are you going to be able to get it like a flu shot? Are you going to need a booster? Are you going to need to get it, once every 3 years? We don't know any of this. And it's only been 3 months or 4 months now, and people can't even sit still for that long,
right.
And can't even wear masks, and can't even understand or abide by social distancing. And it's turned into just this nightmare,
Yeah.
And the longer people resist this, and we're such a selfish race, and so and in need of instant gratification, and feel like we're being deprived because we can't go to a store or something,
Right.
or to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Unless something happens, or somebody puts into place that you really have to stop this, it's not going to stop. It's just going to get worse,
Right.
And everything's going to be held up, including every movie you want to see, every TV show you want to go back,
Yeah.
all these things. So unfortunately, what's going on right now, this whole craziness, everything's spiking, all over as we're reopening. You're seeing places are reopening, the numbers go up. So it's, we're not ready to reopen. So again, that's why when you talk about reopening Hollywood, if that's what you want to say, I can't imagine. I just can't, so how long it'll be, it might not be for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And people don't want to hear that,
Right.
and they tell you you're crazy and you're paranoid and you're, you don't know what you're talking about. But I know how viruses spread. I mean, I knew that when I was in school.
Right.
Yeah, the ignorance, and also it doesn't help. Like, obviously, they don't have a government that is concerned about the welfare of our citizens as opposed to the economy.
Right.
And you have to, and listen, I get it. People have to work too. I mean,
you hope there's a balance there, though, right? I mean, of just sort of looking at the facts and the data and saying, okay, if we need to get back to work, here's how we do it safely. And it feels like, from the president on down, governors and everyone too.
Other countries that have had this, you can look this up. Those governments are paying their citizens almost all of their yearly salaries, even if they're not going to work.
Right.
So they're giving them so they're not worried about money. Then they don't feel that need that they have to, they don't have the economic pressure. Other countries are doing that.
Yeah.
We don't do that. They gave people $1,200 and said, good luck.
Yeah.
And that's why, unless something happens, I don't know how. We're so big. I don't know how, how it's going to go back to normal. Not to mention, it'll never go back to normal. But it's not even about how or when. It's just like, I can't. I mean, nobody can predict it, really. Nobody, not even the doctor can predict it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was on the phone with my immunologist this morning, and she knows the top immunologists in the country, and there's really no consensus because the virus is going to tell us. It's going to be the thing to lead us and tell us when we can function as a species again, without getting each other sick and killing each other.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my PSA for this podcast.
I'm with you. And, I guess in the meantime, it's, we make TV shows at home, like you and Jenji are doing with social distance and, figure out more of those.
And I just read that Netflix picked up this whole thing that lots of directors made short films in their own homes. That just came out too, if you want to look it up.
Oh, cool.
I forgot the names of it, like directors that have made short films in their homes just with the equipment that they have in their homes. It's going to come out on Netflix in June, I think, like June 30th, of short films. So that'll be interesting. I mean, we'll just have to experiment until we're back to, to some semblance,
right,
of being able to put up a full production.
All right, there we go. Jennifer Euston. You know what I love about this show is that it's just conversations, and they go in directions that you didn't expect. You never know exactly what you're going to end up talking about. Jennifer, it turns out, is really into the viral stuff, and she really understands it. And it was great talking to her about coronavirus because clearly it's on my mind. I mean, I spent the whole beginning of the show talking about that. So you guys, know how I stand on it, but that was fun. And I'll definitely be looking for Social Distance on Netflix sometime soon. All right, new show on Thursday. I'm going to be talking to Rory Scovel. Rory is a stand-up comedian, and he actually has a show on Comedy Central that I talked with Payman Benz about a few episodes ago called Robbie. Payman directed the show and was a producing director on it. Well, Rory created Robbie and plays Robbie. So I was really excited to talk to him. We dig into parenting. We dig into religion. We dig into stand-up comedy. There's a lot in this conversation. It's going to be a good one. And that's coming up on Thursday. So I hope you come back for that. Please. It'll be fun. All right. Thank you for tuning in today. You know where to find me. I'm at Heath Racela on Twitter and Instagram. And please leave a rating, leave a review if you like the show. Really appreciate you sticking with it. I'll talk to you on Thursday. Everybody stay safe out there.